doing so, as my partner pointed out, so that we can actually build upon our own advantages, give Israel more clout, actually, make them better, make them look better in the whole Middle Eastern region. And essentially, this advantage right here, their big impact was that war will. Their big thing here was basically, by doing so, we're going to make Israel look like a weakened state. And by making Israel look like a weakened state, whenever we end up pulling out of Iraq in 2010, 2011, that suddenly Iran is going to come in and sweep the Kurds and commit complete genocide. And whereas that doesn't really necessarily link to this whole position, because even if Israel does look weaker, I don't really know how that exactly correlates to the war in Iraq, and how whatever happens when we pull out there. Just to quickly touch on that. The people in Iraq, the Iraqis, they actually have a different support element right now. They have the U.S. troops that are training them to become a bigger, better army, and a better nation. They have Sunni, Shias, and Kurds in there. They're a combined nation, although they're already separated. They're not going to have another nation come in there and declare war on them. It's just not going to happen because one state that's a little further out is losing any sort of anything, which they're not, any sort of political process, which they're actually not doing. So this disadvantage actually doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually link to the plan in the first place. I'm going to move on to disadvantage 2, yes.
Point of clarification for that,
okay.
The link was the UN pulling out as well. There was an entire section on that.
Okay, well, if the UN pulls out, you still have contractors there. You still have a ton of other support there. And I didn't hear anything about the UN pulling out either. But let's say the UN does in fact pull out. They don't really have a huge saying there anyway. You have other countries that are in there. There are no UN forces that are actually stationed in Iraq right now. You have other nations that are actually over there. Well, excuse me. There isn't a large presence of UN forces over there stationed right now. And I would know because I was actually in Iraq and I got to see all these guys over there. Really, you have the next biggest nation that's actually helping to support the people in the war in Iraq are the British, and they have a much, much smaller number. Theirs is in the thousands, where ours is in the tens of thousands. So those are the big troops you have to worry about, not necessarily the UN. So let's talk about nuclear war real quick, or their second disadvantage, which is nuclear war. And the thing I have to say about this disadvantage right here is that essentially it is non-unique. And what I mean to say by this is that currently in the status quo, the way things are going right now, Israel is going to attack anybody as it is. The way it happens here is that, well, Israel is going to be under pressure as it is right now. And the more we keep telling them what to do, the worse things are going to get. Eventually, if we don't placate both sides of this, what they're going to end up doing is they're going to want to attack somebody. But with the support that they have, as my partner pointed out, with Saudi Arabia and Egypt, it helps them to actually get a better position. They're not going to feel pressured into making any sort of rash decisions, because Saudi Arabia and Egypt, as my partner pointed out, are currently putting pressure on Iran to stop making any sort of other kind of attacks against Israel. Like my partner said, with the whole hegemony advantage, we actually have with the whole hegemony advantage, we actually have Egypt and we have Saudi Arabia, like I said, currently putting pressure on them. So they're actually helping to side with Israel. Israel has no need to go out and attack. And the other thing I have to say about that with attacks, they claim that Israel is absolutely saying that they're not going to accept conditional aid. Well, if we take it out, we kind of take out the whole reason to fight anyway. And the reason why I do this is because this is what the U.S. does. We actually currently provide $50 billion in foreign aid every year, specifically for the war effort. So Israel actually wants to receive this aid from us, and that's a big number right there. So if they don't get this aid from us, they lose their ability to fight the war. They lose that war effort. They lose all that money. They lose all the support to sustain their troops over there, which is going to be a big deal. So they can't actually do that. The U.S. or the state of Israel actually needs our say for this. The state of Israel actually needs U.S. support to make this war happen, to make any sort of war happen. So if we pull out our conditional aid, they're not going to want to fight. So they're actually going to want to do what we have going on here. So essentially, what's going on with disadvantage 2 is it's actually, like I said, non-unique, and it's not going to happen because if plan doesn't pass, new war would happen anyway. So I'm going to actually, yeah. So that's the way that's going to happen anyway. Moving on the case real quick. They said that they can actually they like the case, but their big issue here was solvency, and really they don't really expand too much on how solvency is a big issue. Essentially, my partner made this pretty clear right here. We actually have the West Bank, which we're going to stop building settlements on. Now, the people that actually control the West Bank are Fatah, and you have Hamas, who is actually controlling the Gaza Strip. So if we don't placate Fatah, what we're going to end up doing, or if we don't placate Fatah, what we're going to end up doing during this next election that's coming up here very soon is we're going to have more and more support for Hamas, who has a history of actually committing violent acts. And by doing so, if we let the playing field go in the favor of Hamas, then essentially what we're doing is letting more and more violent attacks happen. So we're allowing for more violence. So by actually pulling or for having that conditional aid, which is going to make Israel not want to build more settlements, what we're doing is actually helping the Fatah gain more ground, which helps them to gain that whole election privilege, which actually will solve this problem, which will solve these harms of making additional war between countries. So to quickly talk about what else was the thing here. Another claim that the opposition made here was basically not a single Middle Eastern country is actually wanting, or not a single Middle Eastern country would not like to see Israel wiped off the map. Well, if that were the case, then Israel would not be allied with Egypt and would not be allied with Saudi Arabia, which my partner pointed out right now, with the polarization that happened. Essentially, that's just not true. That's not the case. And although Iran might like to see Israel wiped off the map, there aren't a whole lot of other countries out there that necessarily want them. Well, Iran and Palestine, but not every other single country necessarily wants that. Anyway, going on to advantage number 2 here, hegemony. And basically, by doing plan here, what we're doing is, by having plan, what we're actually doing is preventing the whole regional war, as my partner said. And we don't actually necessarily want different countries to come in and attack Israel right now, because what that would happen, or what that would lead to, is Palestine and Iran and Russia all getting together and fighting. So as you can see, you want to vote for this plan, because well, it would stop a lot. Thank you. I'm just sitting for the stop.